Chapter 458. Shackles of Hope. Sunny froze, then took a careful step back and stared at the walls of the great hall. Mordred's timing this time around was impeccable. It was not like Sunny had planned to get too close to the mass of darkness, but he might have underestimated the danger it presented. To be honest, he felt that he wasn't thinking entirely straight. It was not like he had lost control, but the strange pull he felt outside the tower was much stronger here, exerting a subtle effect on his mind. Sunny tensed and glanced at the pulsating dark rift, then realized that the pull emanated from the shackles that were the source of it. "Why, what is that thing?" The lost prince remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. "I really can't make sense of you." Sunny blinked. That was not the answer he had expected. What is that supposed to mean?" Mordred answered with a bit of doubt in his voice. "Nothing really. It's just that some things about you suggest a certain background, but then there are as many contradictions. Don't you know what a seed of nightmare looks like?" Sunny jumped back, then cautiously looked at the mass of shimmering darkness again. So that was a seed of nightmare, a vile manifestation of the spell that grew in the dream realm and eventually blossomed, opening a gate to the real world for the nightmare creatures to enter. The thing that awakened were supposed to seek out and destroy by challenging the nightmare contained within. No wonder it exerted a pull on him. He scowled, then said with annoyance, "How am I supposed to know what a seed of nightmare looks like? I only became an awakened a few months ago." Mordred spoke in his usual polite tone. "Have your clan elders not taught you anything?" Sunny opened his eyes wide, a shocked expression appearing on his face. "Clan? What clan? Do I look like a legacy to you?" The lost prince did not answer, letting Sunny boil with outrage in silence. Eventually, he slowly exhaled and asked dejectedly, "Anyway, are you sure that that's what it is?" Mordred lingered for a long time, then said quietly, "I am. I searched for it for a long time after all." Hearing these words, Sunny frowned. "And what? Wait, is that why you were trying to reach the ivory tower, to challenge a nightmare?" He rubbed his face in frustration, trying to find a way to make sense of that statement, then shook his head. "Why the hell would you do that? There's no shortage of seeds of nightmare everywhere in the dream realm, ones that are not hidden behind endless voids and oceans of divine flame. These things were not so numerous that one stumbled on one every day, but also not so rare to go to these lengths to reach one." What had Mordred been thinking? The lost prince answered after a short pause, his voice slightly amused. "You are not a legacy indeed." Sunny let out a heavy sigh. "Either you are extra obscure today, or I can't understand you for some reason. What do legacies have to do with any of this?" Mordred thought for a bit, then said, "This seed of nightmare is a very, very special one." What is he going on about? The only thing that differentiated seeds in Sunny's mind was their category. A Category 2 seed would blossom into a Category 2 gate and contained a second nightmare. If an awakened challenged it and passed the trial, they would become a master. If a master challenged a Category 3 seed and survived the third nightmare, they would become a saint. The same thing went for sovereigns. Although there only had been 3/4 nightmares conquered in all of human history, as far as Sunny knew, and he knew more than most people. How could a seed be special? As if guessing what he was thinking about, Mordred spoke. "There are a lot of masters, but not all masters are equal. There are a few dozen saints, but not all saints are equal. And similarly, there are numerous nightmares, but not all nightmares are equal." Sunny scowled. "How so? Is it easier, more difficult?" The lost prince sighed. "Neither. As far as the difficulty of the trial is concerned, the spell is always fair in its own perverse way. However, that doesn't mean that the outcome is always the same. What enemies you vanquish determine what memories and echoes you receive. What battles you fight determines what experience you will bring back. Sonny thought back on his own arsenal of memories and had to admit that the more unique nightmare creatures he had fought, the greater the reward was. In that sense, challenging a unique nightmare would certainly pose more risk, but also promise a greater boon. Add the existence of the lineage memories into the equation. A deep frown appeared on his face. Mordred, however, was not done talking. But more than that, the nature of the nightmare you challenge determines what knowledge you will receive and what secret you will be able to glean. As a researcher, you should know that the lessons humans can learn from the decrepit ruins in the dream realm are not that profound. Where do you think most of our knowledge comes from? It comes from the stories people bring back from their nightmares, of course. That made sense. There were actual natives of the dream realm out and about in the nightmares, after all, like Oro of the Nine. Even if he was really just an illusion created by the spell was no simple thing. Most of the knowledge Sonny possessed was built on the foundation of what he had learned from the noble swordsman and scholar. How much more would he know if he had gone into the nightmare with the intention to not only survive, but also learn? Sonny glanced at the dark seed. It had grown in the tower that had once belonged to one of the 7 demons. What mysteries would such a nightmare reveal? Mordred gave him time to think, then said in an even tone, "For that reason, legacy clans, not all of them, but the truly powerful ones, select the nightmares for their members to challenge very carefully." Sonny lingered for a bit, then raised an eyebrow. "What crazy clan chose that cursed seed for you to try and find then?" The Lost Prince laughed. "Oh no, no one had wished for me to seek it. It was my decision alone. In fact, I suspect that only 2 people in both the waking world and this one know about its existence. Me, and now you." He chuckled again and then added, "But that is what makes it so special as well. None of them could have learned of its existence, reached it, and taken its rewards as their own." After that, Mordred suddenly grew silent. He remained that way for a while, and then added quietly, "Well, it's not like I managed to do it either." He sighed, lingered for a few moments, and then added in a wistful tone, "Can you imagine what secrets that seed hides? What one would learn from that nightmare? A nightmare. A nightmare that was created from the chains with which Hope herself had been bound." Hope herself. Sonny stared at the 7 chains, finding new meaning in their cruel visage and the misshapen, torn remnants of the 7 rune-inscribed shackles. So the sun god's ire had not been quelled by just destroying her kingdom. He had gone a step further, binding the demon of hope at the heart of her decimated domain. For how long? And how had she escaped in the end? He tilted his head. So the demon of hope was chained here. Mordred answered with a hint of surprise in his voice. "You know of the demons?" A crooked smile appeared on Sonny's face. "I do, a bit. Why wouldn't I? Although truth be told, there's not a lot of information about them, even among the Dream Realm researchers. So, the ruler that you had told me about was one of the demons, a lesser deity." Mordred kept silent for a bit, then said dejectedly, "Yes, I'm not sure that those 2 words really go together, though. I also don't know what Hope had done to earn the wrath of the Lord of Light. However, I do know that these 7 chains are what is holding is the chained isles from falling into the sky below." Sonny raised his eyebrows. "What?" The Lost Prince sighed. "People think that there are numerous heavenly chains connecting all the island, but in fact, there are only 7, and you are looking at their roots. Or rather, there were only 7. Each of them had to be broken for the ivory tower to become untethered, of course. So, now the islands are linked by the fragments of the original 7 chains, many of them severed from each other. That is why they are slowly crumbling, one after another." Sonny thought for a bit, trying to correct the way he used to think about the chained isles. The new information was interesting, but not very useful. Shaking his head, he turned back to the seed of nightmare. So, what is the category of that thing? I guess it contains a second nightmare, since you wanted to challenge it. Mordred answered succinctly. Correct. That's one way I can get out of the dream realm, then. But am I suicidal enough to go into the second nightmare alone? Whole cohorts of experienced, awakened routinely perish in their attempts to become masters. What would my chances of survival be with no one to cover my back? Just as Master Jet had said, no one survived in the dream realm alone. She probably knew from experience. He scowled. Wait, will this seed create a gate in the real world if it's not destroyed? When Mordred answered, his voice was almost indifferent. Indeed, but not for a long time, maybe in a few years or a decade. It has not matured enough to be able to bloom yet. Sunny hesitated. But it can be challenged, right? The lost prince did not answer for a while, but then finally said, Yes, a seed can be challenged before it blooms as well as after. If the seed is not found in time and a gate opens, challengers can fight their way through and enter the nightmare directly. The gate also disrupts the anchors of those near it, so masters and saints that enter the dream realm will appear in the vicinity of the blooming seed. After that, they can lead awakened to it. He paused, then added, In fact, most of the seeds are not found in time, because the dream realm is vast and only partially explored. That's why the nightmare creatures are entering our world so often. Challenging a seed before it blooms is much better. In this case, however, I would advise against it. Sunny turned away from the mass of shimmering darkness, then asked in an even tone, Yeah, why? Mordred let out a heavy sigh. Conquering a second nightmare alone is not impossible, but attempting it is tantamount to gambling your life away. The chances of returning alive are very slim. That is why Awakened challenge them as members of cohesive, experienced cohorts. Even then, many don't survive, most even. But this nightmare is actually far worse. Entering it is a guaranteed death sentence, regardless of how many challengers there are. Unless... Sunny kept his ears open, suddenly very attentive. Unless what? The lost prince remained silent for a short moment, then said, There is a black altar in the place you call Night Temple. On it lies an ivory knife. Only those who have shed blood on the altar and received the memory of the knife have a chance to survive the trial that hides within the seed. Sunny blinked a couple of times. Wait, that sounds very familiar. He thought for a few seconds, then asked, Would the obsidian knife from the white altar of the sanctuary of Noctis work? Mordred laughed. Sure, having both would be even better, incredibly so. However, I don't know the method to receive the memory of the obsidian knife. The ritual seems to be different from the one required for the altar in the Night Temple, and I have never figured it out. You didn't, but I might have. The image of the covetous coffer appeared in Sunny's mind, full of golden coins. There were almost 1,500 of them inside. Would that be enough to allow him to lift the obsidian knife off the altar? He had a feeling that it would. What do these knives actually do, though? And how the hell do you know all this? However, there was no response. Mordred was once again gone. Sunny was left alone in the beautiful hall of the Ivory Pagoda, staring at its white walls and the darkness that had taken root between them. The seed of nightmare was calling to him, demanding to be challenged and destroyed, or maybe simply to be fed a delicious human soul. Crazy, this is crazy. Challenging a second nightmare alone was very similar to throwing his life away, and that was even without the particular piece of information that Mordred had given him, that no one would be able to survive this very special nightmare without a memory of one of the two altar knives, or better yet, in possession of both. The question was, what was worse? Challenging the nightmare, or attempting to survive the crushing, Sonny remained in the Hall of Chains for a while, looking at the seed of nightmare and the shimmering darkness that suffused it. Then he walked outside. Full of thought, Sonny passed between the jaws of the dead dragon and slowly headed toward the lake. There, he sat on the stone bench and stared at the water with a dark expression on his face. The wind lightly caressed his face and his pale skin, soothing the few remaining burns that he had received in the sky below. Saint stood silently by his side, her graceful onyx figure reflecting in the clear waters of the lake. A heavy sigh escaped from his lips. "I am almost home." More than a month ago, he had ventured on an expedition to explore the shipwreck island and search for clues about the whereabouts of the treasure left behind by mysterious Noctis. He had only planned to be gone for a week. He had found the treasure but also fought and defeated two devils, one fallen and one ascended, receiving two powerful memories in the process. After that, he gazed at the tapestry of fate through the eyes of a divine mask and plunged into an endless abyss. He spent several weeks plummeting through a sea of nothingness, only to be met by an ocean of flames in its depths. On the other side of the fire was a black tower built by an ancient demon, and in it was a severed hand of a deity, consumed by a terrible rot. There, Sonny swallowed a phalanx bone of Weaver and received the second part of their lineage. After that, he used divine flames to open a portal between the dark void and the sunlit heavens, and found the 7 chains that a god had once used to bind desire, the demon of hope. And somewhere along the way, he met a lost soul who called himself Mordred, the Prince of Nothing, a disembodied voice that came out of nowhere and helped him along the way. Now, Sonny just had to do one last thing, either plunge into a deadly nightmare or off the edge of the Ivory Island to be met with the obliterating fury of the crushing. With a heavy sigh, he turned around and stared at the white bones of the great beast that had wrapped its mighty body around the base of Hope's beautiful tower once, thousands of years ago, before succumbing to death. Let's get this show on the road, I guess. Sometime later, Sonny was leaning on the wall of the ivory tower. He was in a tight spot between the tail of the dead dragon and the white surface of the great pagoda, with Saint standing near him, her weapons dismissed. With a crooked smile, Sonny wrapped the 2 shadows around his body and circulated shadow essence through the coils of the soul serpent, preparing for what was about to come. Then he looked at the taciturn stone demon and raised his eyebrows. "What are you waiting for? Push." Saint gave him an indifferent look, then took a step forward, placed her hand on the surface of the massive bone in front of her, and pushed with all her demonic strength. Her feet sunk into the soil by a few centimeters, but the ancient bone did not move. Until Sonny joined his shadow, that was. Pressing his shoulder against the adamantine white surface, he poured shadow essence into his muscles and pushed too. Although it felt as though the strain was going to kill him, the bone finally gave. One of the massive vertebrae comprising the dead dragon's tail rolled over, separating from the rest. "Come on, keep at it." Of course, Sonny was not going to challenge a second nightmare alone. What was he, crazy? Well, maybe he was a little, but being suicidal was not a part of his very mild, borderline charming craziness. Instead, he was going to throw a piece of the dead dragon's tail off the edge of the Ivory Island and ride it all the way down to the ground, hoping that it would survive the onslaught of the crushing. If a dragon couldn't, then what could? Put your back into it. Saint didn't really need his encouragement or advice, so Sonny was mostly shouting for his own benefit, since producing loud noises seemed to help him cope with the strain of trying to push the ancient bone for some reason. Luckily, now that it had been dislodged, the process became easier. Together, they slowly moved the massive vertebra past the gazebo containing the inactive portal, then past the grove of ancient trees, and finally to the very edge of the island. There, Sonny stopped for a moment and tried to catch his breath. Then he cautiously looked down. That was a mistake. If before the colorful mosaic of the flying islands far below was simply a breathtaking sight, now that he had to actually jump down, it made Sonny dizzy and frightened out of his wits. Ugh. But it was too late to change his mind. Wasn't it? Gritting his teeth, Sonny tried not to think about the inconceivable height and climbed inside the vertebra, which of course was hollow at the center. There was just enough space there to fit his body, and that was the reason why he had chosen this particular one in the first place. He lingered for a long time, trying to gather his courage. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe I should just enter the seed. What's the big deal anyway? It's just a second nightmare. But no, there was no way back. He simply had to do it. Inhaling deeply, Sonny held his breath for a moment and then screamed in a small voice. "Saint, push it over." Outside the massive vertebra, the taciturn demon stared at the surface of the ancient bone for a moment, and then gave it a devastating kick. As the tailbone of the dragon plunged off the edge of the ivory island, giving Sonny a serious rattle, he yelped, dismissed Saint, and dissolved into the shadow that dwelt in the hollow space inside the vertebra. Of course, he wasn't going to try and survive the crushing in his physical form. He just needed a large enough shadow to hide in. As long as the dragon bone endured, the shadow would too, and he would be safe. If it endured. For a couple of seconds, everything seemed fine, but then the vertebra left the bubble of safety surrounding the heavenly island, and suddenly, an inconceivable pressure struck it from all sides like a hammer of a wrathful god, making the porcelain bone produce terrifying cracking noises. Once again, Sonny was plummeting with terrible speed through the sky. Only this time, the vehicle he had chosen to transport him was even stranger, as well as spinning like crazy, with the wind roaring deafeningly all around. Luckily, he couldn't get sick as a shadow otherwise. His already empty stomach would have become emptier. Curses, don't break, you damn bone. The vertebra of the dead dragon was cracking and slowly breaking apart, but miraculously still holding together. At this height, the crushing was deadly enough to pulverize the flesh of a saint, a bona fide demigod, into a bloody paste, maybe even a big, red cloud. But the adamantine dragon bone was only now beginning to slowly crumble apart. Once the process started, though, it became unstoppable. Sonny panicked as he watched wide cracks appear on the white surface all around him. Then a piece of the bone flew away, letting in a chaotic flood of light. Cursing, he shifted away from the breach, but seconds later another appeared, and then another. The size of the shadow he could hide in was growing smaller and smaller. Crap! Soon there were more holes and cracks in the bone than he could count. And then it crumbled completely. At the last second, Sonny slid onto the biggest remaining slab of the ancient vertebra, and then went into a crazy dance, shifting from one side of it to another as the fragment spun and exposed different parts of it to the sunlight. Small pieces broke off from it, and then the fragment itself cracked too. Arg! Finally, the piece of the adamantine vertebrae disintegrated into a rain of splinters that were too small to fit Sonny into their shadows. With nowhere else to hide, he was thrown out into the physical world, his body instantly becoming the victim of the bone-breaking force of the crushing. Luckily, his bones were now much more robust than before, and the crushing was already not as irrevocably obliterating as it had been higher up. As a loud scream escaped from Sonny's mouth, he continued to fall, feeling his body go through a cruel meat grinder. But with the help of 2 shadows and a generous outpour of shadow essence, it wasn't enough to kill him or even seriously wound him. It was simply painful, damaging, and unpleasant. The tailbone of the dead dragon had carried him down for long enough to go through the worst layers of the crushing. Now all he had to do was stick the landing. With a suppressed groan, Sonny struggled to control his fall and finally managed to stabilize his body, preventing it from spinning madly. The chained aisles were now much closer than they had been before. In fact, he could even recognize a few nearest ones. "Don't you dare miss, you pale bastard." He really didn't want to repeat the whole damned process again. Summoning the dark wing, Sonny waited for a second for the dragonfly cloak to activate its enchantment, and then slowly started to turn his fall into a glide. A single thought rang in his mind. "I made it, I actually made it, crap, I really did." Sometime later, a figure of a young man fell from the skis and nimbly landed on the index finger of the giant iron hand that lay in the center of a peaceful, quiet island. The young man looked a bit strange. He was naked above the waist, with several half-healed burns covering his pale skin, and a menacing, intricate tattoo of a coiling black serpent covering his arms, as well as a large part of his torso. His black hair was wild and disheveled, and his dark eyes seemed a little crazy. Sonny swayed a little, caught his balance, and turned to a group of awakened who were sitting around a dancing campfire, staring at him with their mouths wide open. A bright smile appeared on his face. "Ah, good day to you, fellow humans, say." As mad intensity appeared in his eyes, Sonny licked his lips and asked hoarsely, "Is that food I see roasting over your fire?" The heavy lid of the metal sarcophagus opened, letting out bluish light and wisps of cold mist. Soon, a pale hand emerged from inside. Jumping out of the sleeping pod, Sonny landed on the floor, felt the ceramic texture of the armored plates beneath his bare feet, and let out a low, satisfied sigh. "I'm back finally." It was so nice to return to the real world. After meeting the cohort of the sanctuary awakened on the Iron Hand Island, he traveled back to the Citadel with them. Some were curious about where he had been for more than a month, but most weren't even aware that Sonny had gone missing. He used the full scope of his formidable ability to bend the truth every which way, and left them with the impression that his recent expedition had been long, but not very exciting. They did continue to give him strange looks the whole way back, though, for some reason. But Sonny wasn't too bothered by that. After entering the sanctuary, he went straight for the altar. Since it was the middle of the day and the moon was hidden behind the horizon, he couldn't use the coins immediately. So, instead, he simply touched the altar and left the dream realm. Home, I'm finally home. Even though Sonny had not spent a lot of time in his new house, the feeling of safety both its walls and the real world gave him was extremely comforting. Miraculously, even though he had been gone for many weeks, his body felt completely fine. It was as though he had only slept for a night. That's the magic of technology. Glancing at the extravagantly expensive sleeping pod, Sonny decided that he had spent his money well, and headed for the exit out of the basement while whistling a cheerful tune. Then, however, he froze. What the hell? Something was not right. First of all, he had never used the lighting in the underground dojo, but now it was turned on, drowning everything with bright light. Secondly, the armored doors of the lift leading up were violently torn open. It was as though a massive nightmare creature had broken through the defense systems of the house and ripped them apart, bending the adamantine alloy like it was wax. Crap! Sonny jumped back and summoned the cruel sight. What could have come here? Did a gate open nearby? Full of tension and grim determination, he used the stairwell to climb to the ground floor and cautiously entered his living room. The first thing he saw there were dirty dishes, lots and lots of dirty dishes. The second thing he saw were two hazel eyes staring at him with scathing accusation. Have I gone really crazy? Somehow, Effie was in his living room, sitting in her wheelchair with a bowl of steaming cup noodles in one hand and chopsticks in the other. There was a very disgruntled expression on her face. What the hell is she doing here? What's going on? Staring at Sunny, Effie swallowed a mouthful of noodles and then said in a dark tone, "You're back. Way to make your friends worry, asshole." As it turned out, back when Sunny had been falling into the sky below and thinking about how no one would miss him, he was very, very wrong. In fact, the opposite had happened. About 2 weeks after he stopped answering their messages, both Effie and Kai got worried. Effie went to the academy to check on him, and that was when they learned that Sunny moved out of the dormitory. "Bastard, you could have told us that you bought yourself a house, you know. You owe me a housewarming party." Sunny blinked. "A what party? Is there really such a thing, or is she pulling my leg?" Not knowing where to find him, Kai used his connections to learn Sunny's new address. Since he was limited in where he could go without drawing the attention of the press, Effie went instead, and when she found the basement locked, well, my armored doors, it was you broke them." She sneered. "What are you crying about? Those armored doors of yours were pathetically easy to break anyway. Buy yourself better ones. Anyway, I thought that I was going to find your corpse in the sleeping pod. Do you even know how that made me feel?" A heavy expression appeared on her face. "That would have been a real tragedy." Sunny sighed. "Well, at least she cares. I mean, just think about it. All those amazing memories you hoard gone just like that. If you're going to die, at least give them to me before you do." I spoke too soon. After making sure that his life signs were stable inside the sleeping pod, Effie stayed to keep a watch on him, while both she and Kai tried to find out where Sunny was. Apparently, they went as far as contacting the representatives of the White Feather clan. "You didn't." Sunny grabbed his head, realizing that he had a lot of explaining to do once he was back in the sanctuary. A cohort of random awakened was one thing, but if Saint Tyrus herself was aware of his disappearance, things were going to get much harder for him. Effie snorted. "Of course we did. We also contacted Cassie and her fire keepers, since they have a cohort in that remote hellhole you are anchored at. But even she didn't know where the hell you have disappeared to." "Curses. They even brought Cassie into it." Sunny groaned. "But why would you do all this?" Effie gave him a long look, then shook her head dejectedly. "Doofus, can you stop being such a doofus?" He stared at her in bewilderment. "What is that supposed to mean?" She shook her head again and activated her communicator. "Ponder on it, and while you're at it, be quiet for a few minutes. I need to call Kai and tell him that you have turned up. Poor guy must have flown halfway to the Chained Isles by now." Sunny eyes grew wide. "Flown what?" Effie gave him a pitying look. Then she said, "What part of be quiet did you not understand?" After Effie gave Kai a call and let him know that Sunny was alive and back in the real world, they spent a minute in awkward silence. Sunny looked around, taking in the sight of his once pristine and orderly living room. Now there were dirty dishes everywhere, as well as empty packets of takeout food. At least he thought that that was what they were, since he had never actually bought one before. Effie was such a slob. There were even several pieces of clothing thrown into a corner. Speaking of clothing. Crap. By the way, Sunny, when did you get this badass tattoo? A big, long snake, no less, makes a girl wonder. He sighed heavily, cursing the fact that he had not adjusted the puppeteer's shroud after summoning it back in the basement. There were no burns on his skin now, after all. "It's not really a tattoo. It's a magical serpent that helps me control and regenerate essence faster. Don't ask why it manifests as a tattoo, because I have no idea, really." He hesitated for a bit, then asked, "So you've been just living here for these past few weeks?" Effie shrugged. "Sure, someone had to monitor your vital signs. Plus, my family, well, they deserved a break after taking care of my comatose body for 4 years and everything before that. So I bought a very nice place for us and then sort of moved out. Then an animated expression appeared on her face. Don't worry, though. The stuff you keep in your bedroom remained a secret. I can't even go up the stairs, remember? Sunny stared at her in outrage. What stuff? There's no stuff. I don't even use the bedroom. I can't really sleep, can I? Effie laughed. Right, makes sense. That you are not doing it on the bed kind of guy. Oh yeah, what happened to your fridge? He glared, then looked away in embarrassment. That I sort of broke it, by accident. Then a sudden smile appeared on his face. Want to go buy a new one? Since Kai wanted to meet, Sunny and Effie decided to visit an elite shopping center in the center of the city, and then wait for him in a posh restaurant nearby. The former huntress also told Sunny that she would hold off on asking questions about his unexpected adventure until all three of them were together, so that he didn't have to repeat everything twice. Which suited him fine, since he needed time to decide what he wanted to tell his friends, and what would be better kept to himself. There was so much he needed to think about and do. The journey into the sky below had not only disrupted his plans in the real world, but also added new things to his agenda. From training to wield a spear better to setting up a shop to sell the soul shards he had brought back with the help of the covetous coffer, there were just too many opportunities in front of him. He also had to decide what to do about Rain, and continue practicing shadow dance in the dreamscape. Everyone had forgotten about Mongrel by now, surely. No doubt about it. Adult life is hard. They reached the shopping center with the help of a passenger PTV, which seemed a bit too luxurious to Sunny, but was a necessity, considering that it would have been hard for Effie to move around in public transport. Not only because of her disability, but also because she was somewhat of a celebrity. He had noticed at least 3 propaganda posters depicting her, the way she looked in the dream realm, to be exact, on buildings as the PTV drove toward the heart of the city. Even he had to agree that Effie looked impressive, like a beautiful goddess of war that knew no fear or would never surrender to anything, not even the hopeless darkness of the forgotten shore. Triumph and perseverance, that was what people needed to see, considering how hard and dire life in the real world could seem sometimes, even if it was just a sweet, benevolent lie. It gave them hope, at least. A hope gave them strength. Noticing his gaze, Effie grinned. Looking good, am I? He had no choice but to tell the truth. Well, yeah. She giggled. Do you remember how Scar and Park came up with a story to make me seem like some kind of a folk hero in the outer settlement, back when Gunlog's people were searching for me? Well, the government ran wild with it, as you can see. Plus the fact that I was in charge of the first line during the siege, they made me into a poster girl for the young generation of the awakened. Right after Nephi's, of course. Her face suddenly grew dark and solemn. After a long pause, Effie added, It's a shame that neither of them lived long enough to see their stupid story become a worldwide hit. Park would have been so full of himself now if he did. I can just about hear him boast. And that was the bitter truth that people didn't get to see. The terrible price of the triumph they celebrated was known only to those who had gone through it, and somehow emerged alive on the other side. The two of them spent some relaxing time in the shopping center, Effie resting in her wheelchair, Sunny pushing it from behind. From time to time, someone recognized her as the famous Raised by Wolves and politely expressed their respect and admiration. He, on the other hand, seemed almost invisible. Sunny didn't mind. It was better that way, really. Being invisible suited a shadow very well. More importantly, the act of buying a stupid refrigerator filled him with pure delight. He had been fantasizing about it for so long in the sky below, after all. In a sense, this whole thing had just been a giant obstacle on his epic quest to buy a fridge. And now, after overcoming countless dangers and hardships, that deadly quest was over. Sunny worked out the details about the delivery, and soon it was time to meet up with Kai. He had never been to a posh restaurant before, but it seemed as though his outer appearance was decent enough to not look out of place. The mundane clothes he wore had been chosen with the help of the charming fashion icon himself, after all. Or maybe it was Effie's presence that made everyone there extra polite and a little bit reverent. They entered a tastefully decorated space and saw a tall individual in a black cap and an ordinary face mask standing nearby. The weirdo was wearing sunglasses inside. Before Sonny could understand what was happening, the masked individual quickly approached and gave him a big hug. Does he really think that his disguise is fooling anyone? And why is he always trying to hug me? Of course it was Kai. No amount of masks and sunglasses could hide the glamorous aura of the enchanting nightingale. It only made him stand out even more. Sonny sighed. That dashing bastard. The three of them sat down and were presented with old-fashioned paper menus to make their choice from. Sonny stared at the word steak for a bit, then shuddered and shifted his gaze to the salad section. A few minutes later, a waiter approached to take their order. Effie spoke. I guess 3 portions of bibimbap, 3 portions of samgyeopsal, 3 bowls of jjajangmyeon, and 3 portions of tteokbokki. Then she turned to them, smiled innocently, and asked, "Oh, and what about you guys? What are you going to order?" Sonny almost choked on the water. He was drinking from a beautiful crystal glass. The waiter, though, somehow managed to keep a straight face. What a professional! Since they were seated in a private booth, Kai finally took off his cap and sunglasses, then smiled brilliantly. His voice sounded so sincere that it irked Sonny a little. It's so nice to see you, Sonny. Effie and I were really worried. Sonny cleared his throat. That's thanks, I guess. I sort of assumed that you wouldn't notice that I was gone. Effie sighed. I am starting to wish that I didn't, you idiot. Anyway, what the hell happened? Why were you gone for an entire month? He hesitated, then said, Do you want to hear the long version or the short version? Kai gave him a curious look. Let's start with the short version, I think. Sonny scratched the back of his head. All right. Well, in that case, I basically just wanted to find clues about a hidden treasure, but ended up almost being eaten by a treasure chest, falling into a bottomless abyss on top of a devil's corpse, and being burned by divine flames. Luckily, there is this voice I can hear in my head sometimes, and it helped me to only get burned a little. Effie tilted her head and gave him a strange look. Kai's smile paled a little. Sonny took a sip of water and continued in a carefree tone. Anyway, deep in the void, I found a black tower. There were some broken dolls and a rotting severed arm inside, which I, ate, sort of. From the black tower in the abyss, I went to a white tower in the skis and then rode back to the ground on a dragon's tail. That's basically it. Oh, and before all that, I kind of killed myself, I guess. Got a very nice memory out of it, too. The two of them stared at him for a few moments, and then sighed almost simultaneously. Kai shook his head. I take it back. Let's hear the long version. Sonny explained the sequence of events that led to him being gone for more than a month, keeping a few things to himself, like the true number of the miraculous coins he had collected, everything having to do with Weaver, and the real reason for why he was so desperate to grow stronger as fast as possible. When he was done, Effie giggled. Well, that faded attribute of yours has really been in overdrive lately, hasn't it? A sour expression appeared on Sonny's face. I guess. I had solid 3 months of nothing too bad or too good happening before that, though. But that's the thing, when it does finally happen, one thing usually leads to another. It's not all terrible, though. I had to work really hard to survive, but other than that, this expedition was a windfall for me. Kai took a sip of tea and then said thoughtfully, And what about this voice, Mordred? Do you trust him? Sonny hesitated, then shrugged. After I made sure that he is not just a figment of my imagination, I came to believe that Mordred is indeed one of the lost, and most likely an awakened just like we are. Most likely, he can communicate with me over a large distance because of the mirror shard I picked up after putting down that strange artificial echo of his. Other than that, though, I don't know. He is very mysterious, to say the least. He thought for a bit and then added, every piece of information he had given me turned out to be true so far, and very helpful. I might have not been alive right now if not for him. So it's hard to say, really. Kai smiled. Well, in that case, he is all right in my book. Sonny paused as the waiter approached to bring the dirty dishes away and refill their glasses. After they were alone once again, he remained silent for a bit, then turned to Effie. But anyway, I do believe that what he said about the seed is true. I think I can get the obsidian knife, which is supposed to make the nightmare easier. So, I wanted to ask, Effie, I know that you can snap your fingers and have a dozen of the most powerful awakened cohorts in the world accompany you to conquer the second nightmare. But, would you consider challenging one with me? He expected her to tease him a little before giving an answer, but Effie remained quiet for a bit, an uncharacteristically serious expression on her face. After a while, she said, challenge a nightmare, now barely 4 months after we had become awakened. Are you crazy, Sonny? He smiled. No, I don't mean now. Both of us need time to grow stronger and prepare, of course. After saying that, Sonny looked away. In 7 months, after the winter solstice, that's when I plan to return to the ivory tower and go into that seed. Will you come with me? Effie looked at him for a long time, then smiled too. Sure, why not? I wouldn't have it any other way even. But Sonny, I have one condition. He raised an eyebrow. Really, what is it? Effie glanced at Kai, then said calmly, you need to convince Cassie to join us too. I don't know what happened between the two of you, but it doesn't matter. Members of a cohort don't need to be friends. They just need to work well together, and our cohort worked perfectly back on the Forgotten Shore. Castor is dead, and Nephi's is gone, but Cassie is still here, and we both know how invaluable her aspect is. As Sonny's face darkened, she added, plus, isn't she anchored at the Night Temple? She can help you get the ivory knife as well. That princeling said that having both would be much better. A nightmare is a nightmare and will be absolutely deadly, no matter how prepared you are. Letting go of any advantage is stupid. Convince Cassie. A wave of anger and protest rose from the depths of Sonny's heart. Even though he had time to recover from what had happened in the Crimson Spire and understood the reason why Cassie had done what she had, he was still full of resentment. He was still hurt. He was still unwilling to even think about forgiving her. But Effie was right. No matter how he felt about Cassie, she was a boon for any cohort, especially now, since she had grown much more confident in her powers after becoming an awakened. She also had other survivors of the Forgotten Shore following her as they waited for Nephi's to return, and the connection to the Clan Valor emissaries in the Night Temple. He didn't have to forgive her to fight side by side with her. He just had to trust that she won't betray him again, which he reluctantly did. Even though Sonny didn't want to give Cassie the benefit of the doubt, he knew that she had learned a bitter lesson. A heavy sigh escaped from his lips. What should I do? It was at that moment that Kai, who had remained silent during their conversation, suddenly spoke. If you don't mind, count me in too. I want to challenge the second nightmare with the 3 of you guys as well. In fact, even if you do mind, I insist. Both Sonny and Effie stared at him in surprise. After a while, the former huntress asked, challenge the nightmare with us. Don't you have a great position in Bastion, safe behind its walls? Has Sonny infected you with his madness? Kai frowned, then looked away. After a while, he said, yes, I do. But do you guys remember Aiko? She had a gambling den in the Bright Castle. Well, anyway, Aiko has a real talent for managing various things, so the agency hired her as my manager. One evening, we ended up talking about the Dark City. A sad smile appeared on his face. Both of you only lived in the outer settlement, which had its own share of challenges, of course, much more dire than what we who paid tribute faced in the castle. But life wasn't that bright there either. He remained silent for a bit, then continued. Aiko had it way worse than I, though, especially after one of the Pathfinders made a point of making her life a living hell, Andal, whose head Lady Nephis eventually took off his shoulders. We all knew it, but no one really helped. A heavy sigh escaped from Kai's lips. Because what could any one of us really do against one of the Pathfinders? But there was a lot of these compromises, of little lies we told ourselves as we closed our eyes to every dark, dirty thing that went on around us. He looked at Effie and said, "People were starving in the outer settlement while we had our bellies full. Well, it wasn't our fault because the castle couldn't feed everyone. Surely. If there was more food, we would have shared. The guards decided to harass someone. Well, that wasn't our fault either because Tessai was too powerful and we were too weak to resist him. And so on endlessly. Everyone went as far as they needed to keep thinking of themselves as one of the good guys." Kai grew silent, then said quietly, "But you see, it actually was our fault. All of us have committed the same crime. We were all weak. When I spoke to Aiko, I finally realized that in this world being weak is a sin, too. At least for us, the awakened. So, yes, I want to challenge the second nightmare, despite being safe and sound behind the walls of the bastion, because I never want to close my eyes to anything, ever again." He looked at them, then smiled. 7 months. That's more than enough time for me to prepare. Plus, don't you need someone who can fly? Or are you going to simply jump into that weird undersky again and just hope to miss all those flames? Sunny coughed. Kai had a point. Well, if you put it like that. After Kai's unexpected and poignant confession, they spent some time simply relaxing, laughing, enjoying their food, and chatting about this and that. Kai shared his experience of winning 12 consecutive weeks of the Avatar Singer and having to lose on purpose in the end, and the furor his face revealed, and the subsequent announcement of Night and Gale's upcoming comeback album caused in the music industry and among the fans. He also complained about having to hire a second publicist because of a strange scandal he had gotten somehow involved in on the network, causing Sunny to look away in shame and keep his mouth tightly shut. Effie mostly talked about all the fried chicken wings she had eaten and all the sorts of beer she had drunk, as well as what types of nightmare creatures she had hunted and fried and ate. She also joked about all the propaganda events the government wanted her to participate in and the various ways with which she had managed to dodge most of them. Sunny shared his experience of buying a house and how it made him feel. He almost got sentimental thinking about his beautiful armored doors that Effie had smashed through, and about his new, expensive, shiny refrigerator. Finally, Kai had to return to his schedule. Before they parted, though, he hesitated, then took out 2 colorful pieces of synthetic paper from his pocket with a very embarrassed expression on his face. Without saying anything, he handed the brochures to Sunny and Effie. Sunny took one and stared at it with a confused expression. It appeared to be an invitation of some sort. On it was an image of 2 people standing back to back with swords in their hands, both of them extremely beautiful in a professional kind of way. The guy was dark-skinned and handsome, with broad shoulders and an incredibly masculine face. The girl was thin and languid, with a slim figure that bordered on being gaunter than Sunny had been in his outskirts days. She had a doll's face with big, glistening eyes and full, slightly parted lips. She was also wearing a very strange and impractical armor, a regal cloak, and a very expensive silver wig. What the hell is this? The title at the top of the brochure read, a song of light and darkness. And right below it, in a smaller font, light shines brighter in the darkest of nights. Passion blossoms hotter in the cold heart of despair. Sonny stared at the piece of paper in his hand with wide eyes. Kai, my friend, what did you just hand me? Effie laughed. No way, they finished filming it. Kai coughed. Yeah. The premiere is in a week, actually. My agency arranged for me to attend and give a short speech. So, will you two come, please? Sonny shook his head. No, wait, no, actually, what is this thing? Effie looked at him with pity. Haven't you heard? They made a movie about us. I mean, about what happened on the Forgotten Shore, sort of. Have you not heard about all the casting news? He slowly shook his head. No. Then Sonny frowned. All right, I get it. But why would I ever want to go and watch this? I would rather eat another mordant mimic. Sorry, Kai, but I am not going. Effie looked at him with mischief and grinned. Oh, hey, Sonny, do you remember how I said that I only had one condition to join you in the nightmare? Well, scratch that. Actually, I have two. After a while, Sonny and Effie returned to his home, just in time to receive the delivery of the refrigerator. Two tall and broad-shouldered store workers unloaded it from the cargo hold of their delivery vehicle and placed the big box down with a bit of strain. After that, one of them smiled and asked, "Good day, where should we put it?" Sonny waved a hand. No need, I'll do it myself." The loaders looked at him doubtfully, then simply shrugged and left after getting his signature. After the vehicle drove off, Sonny looked around, then easily lifted the heavy box and carried it inside the house without any effort whatsoever. Soon, the refrigerator was standing in the place where his old one used to be, the synthwood panels covering its doors blending in with the minimalist design of the kitchen. Effie and Sonny stared at it for a while, satisfied. Then he said, "I like it a lot." Effie smiled. "Yeah, really ties the whole room together, doesn't it? Well, in any case, I hope you won't break it again." After that, she yawned and said in a tired voice, I'm beat. Time to retire to the dream realm. What about you?" Sonny thought for a few moments. Suddenly, a wide smile appeared on his face. "I have an errand to run, but after that I am going in too. Oh, wait. Where are you going to sleep?" Effie shrugged. "Your guest room, where else?" He blinked. "Don't you need a sleeping pod?" The former huntress giggled. "I have one. In your guest room. What? Why are you staring at me like that? Was I supposed to shuffle between the academy and your comatose body every day?" Sonny lingered for a bit, then sighed. "Makes sense. I guess I should have put one there to begin with. What are the chances of me having mundane humans as guests?" Then he waved Effie goodbye and headed for the door as she turned her wheelchair around and rolled toward the guest bedroom. He was very excited about what he was going to do. Some time later, Sonny was in a beautifully lit store, pushing a shopping cart forward and slowly filling it to the brim with all kinds of food, as well as some other things. He was quietly whistling a cheerful tune, imagining all this stuff going into his new fridge. The contents of the cart would have cost more than he could ever dream to make, back when he had been living in the outskirts. But now, he could not only afford it but even do so without having to count his money or feel apprehensive about the cost. He could just buy as much he wanted, of any quality that he wanted, and bring it back home. His own home. Life had changed so much. After a while, he felt as though he got enough. Now that he had the covetous coffer, he could not only bring soul shards out of the dream realm, but also bring stuff from the real world to the chained isles. That meant so much. An unlimited amount of spices, all kinds of snacks to make the long days of exploring less dreadful, various little things to make himself more comfortable. Hell, if he wanted to, he could even bring a tent and sleep in it like a king. Incredible. Oh, this is simply incredible. Of course, not all of these things could be bought in a general store, but he could visit other places or simply order stuff on the network. As he was heading for the registers, a familiar voice suddenly pulled him out of his thoughts. "Mom, can we get ice cream?" Sonny froze for a moment, then slowly turned his head and looked to his left, down a long aisle he was passing. There, a pale girl of around 14 years was standing near a tall, graceful woman in her 40s. An 8-year-old boy with blonde hair and a bright smile was pushing a tub of ice cream into her hands. Sonny watched Rain and her family for a few moments, then turned away and continued on his way, leaving them behind. A quiet sigh escaped from his lips. At least she's doing fine. Well, of course she is. I've only been gone for a month. Why would anything happen simply because I wasn't here? He reached the register, then hesitated for a bit and turned back. When he returned, there were several tubs of delicious ice cream added to his cart. As the light of dawn shined on the chained aisles, Sonny appeared on the altar island of the sanctuary of Noctis. He stared at the sky, grimaced at the absence of the moon, and headed toward his room. Some time later, though, he emerged from there with a peculiar wooden box following him with the help of 8 small iron legs, with the covetous coffer in tow. Sonny walked into the garden, found a familiar rock, lifted the toothy box, and carefully placed it near himself. Then he took out a single soul shard and put it where everyone could see. Soon, one of the awakened noticed him and approached. "Ah, Sonny, you're back, looking to sell some shards again." Sonny smiled. "Oh yes, sure, but hey, that's not all. Brilliant Emporium has some new merchandise." The awakened looked at him with doubt, then asked, "Really, like what?" Sonny's grin grew wider. "How lucky that you happened to ask. Let's see." He put his hand inside the coffer, which then somehow disappeared into the comparatively small box up to the shoulder. Then, Sonny began taking out various items, speaking as he did so. "What do I have in store? Take a look for yourself. Toothpaste, soft, clean underwear, salt, pepper, and all kinds of spices, personal hygiene products. Are you a woman?" "No, have a female friend then. What really? Well, with the stuff I have here that can be fixed. Oh, what is this? Would you look at that?" As more and more people gathered and stared at the absolutely mundane, but precious items that almost none of them had access to in the dream realm with something resembling lust in their eyes, Sonny's own gleamed with greed. By the way, Brilliant Emporium is also proud to announce the opening of a conveyance service. Want our dedicated staff to bring something specific from the real world? No problem. Want to send something to the real world instead? That's not a problem either. For just a small commission. I am going to get rich, so rich. Yes, soul shards were a rare commodity in the real world. But a good pair of underpants in the dream realm was, perhaps, even more valuable. Sonny spent a very pleasant morning selling all the stuff he had brought to the dream realm to a crowd of awakened, each of them ravenous for the small comforts the real world could provide. Very few had a close enough relationship with a master or a saint to be able to get these things here, in a place as remote as the chained isles. Things were slightly different in large citadels like Bastion or Ravenheart, but on the frontier, most people simply had to figure out ways to get by with makeshift replacements. Still, nothing could compare to the real deal. All in all, the Brilliant Emporium was performing splendidly. Of course, Sonny did not charge too much for the small necessities he sold, but it added up. He wouldn't charge a whole soul shard, even if it was from a dormant creature, for a tube of toothpaste. But a few tubes, plus a toothbrush, plus some soap and a box of tea leaves, and a promise to bring some sugar with him the next time. That could work. Unlike before, he wanted soul shards instead of memories. He was going to take these shards to the waking world, where their value was much higher. Out there, soul shards came from only 2 sources. Some were brought back by Ascended and Transcendent from their journeys into the dream realm, and some were scavenged from the corpses of the nightmare creatures that had invaded reality through a gate. They were always in short supply, because anyone in possession of a shard was more likely to use it themselves than to sell it for credits. Saturating their soul core meant much more to an awakened than worldly currency. After all, dead men could not spend their riches. The demand, on the other hand, was extremely high, not only because all awakened strive to become stronger, but also because young sleepers, especially, were able to use these shards to increase their chances of returning from their first venture into the dream realm alive. That was the reason why even Castor, a scion of a prestigious legacy clan, had not entered the Forgotten Shore with his core already fully saturated. And that was the reason why Sonny was going to profit a lot from being in possession of his new favorite memory, the magnificent covetous coffer. After all, he, for better or worse, had no use for the soul shards whatsoever. He could not consume them, so there was no choice to be made between growing stronger himself or earning credits from others. He was going to sell the shards, buy memories, and feed them to Saint. This simple system was almost unfairly lucrative for Sonny, because memories, unlike shards, had no additional value in the real world. Every sleeper and every awakened could bring back memories from the dream realm and freely exchange them there. Which did not mean that memories were cheap. In fact, they were extremely expensive. But the correlation between the number of soul shards he would have to sell and the number of memories he would be able to buy was very much in his favor. And of course, Sonny also didn't even need good memories. The worse, the better. The usefulness of a memory dictated its price, but did not affect the amount of shadow fragments Saint received from consuming them at all. His smile was growing wider and wider. 2 months, 3 max. That's how long it's going to take me to bring Saint to 200/200. And what happens next? Oh my, I can hardly wait to find out. His pleasant thoughts, however, were eventually interrupted by a shadow falling over him. Another customer. Sonny looked up and tensed a little, recognizing the person in front of him. It was a young woman wearing a simple white garment, the same one that had escorted him to meet Master Roan before his journey to the Shipwreck Island. The representative of the White Feather clan. He suppressed a heavy sigh. What can I do for you?" The young woman bowed slightly, then said in a neutral tone, "Saint Tyrus invites you to share a meal with her, awakened sunless." "Curses, that is what I have been afraid of." Sonny shivered slightly. What were the chances of him keeping all his secrets to himself during a conversation with the fearsome demigod in charge of the Chained Isles? Saints were creatures of another breed. It wasn't a coincidence that there were only a few dozen of them across all of humanity. They were not only the most powerful, but also the most skilled, strong-willed, brilliant, and deviously cunning members of the human race. Each was a force to be reckoned with. Nothing less would suffice if one wanted to survive the harrowing trial of the third nightmare. He wasn't sure of his ability to fool such a person. Sonny forced out a weak smile. "It would be my pleasure." The young woman nodded, then turned around, obviously expecting him to follow. Sonny sighed, then dismissed the covetous coffer and stood up from the rock. It was time to face Sky Tide again. The graceful stone chateau perched on top of the tall menhirs of the sanctuary was just as Sonny had remembered it. The open pavilion at the very edge of the ancient monolith had not changed, as well. It was bathed in sunlight and exposed to winds, opening to a breathtaking view of the Chained Isles. The ivory tower floated far above, shrouded in white clouds. This time, there was a simple meal served for 3 people on the round table in the center of the pavilion, and both Master Roan and Saint Tyrus were preparing to eat. The young woman led Sonny to them, gestured to a free chair, and then moved to stand silently by Sky Tide's side. Sonny lingered for a bit, then said awkwardly, Greetings, Lady Tyrus, Master Roan. It's an honor to be invited to join you for dinner. Lunch. Yeah, to join you for lunch. St. Tyrus simply nodded and didn't say anything, but Master Roan looked at him and grinned. Then, he gestured to the food on the table. What are you waiting for, Sunless? Dig in, food's growing cold. Sunny hesitated for a moment, then smiled. If there was one rule he tried to follow faithfully in his life, it was to never refuse free food. Master Roan didn't have to ask him twice. It seemed that the conversation was not going to happen until after the meal, which suited Sunny fine. Not only did he get to enjoy some simple but delicious food provided by the White Feather clan, but he also received a bit more time to think about what he was going to say and how. Sunny focused his attention on the plate in front of him, and after a few moments, a delighted smile found its way onto his face. That's really good. Noticing it, Master Roan chuckled. You like it? Well, I am not going to say that I cooked it myself because that would be a lie, but I did hunt the beast with my own 2 hands. I also watched and gave very wise advice when Tyrus was planting the vegetables. Sunny choked. Tyrus planted what? Sky Tide grew these vegetables herself. The image of the stern saint doing gardening did not fit into his mind at all. He threw a furtive glance at the unnaturally beautiful woman and swallowed. Yeah, can't imagine it. St. Tyrus was calmly eating, not a single emotion appearing on her face. At the mention of her name, she looked at her husband for a second, and then returned to her meal without reacting in any way. Sunny didn't know if she was simply like that around strangers, or always aloof in any case. It was hard to picture Sky Tide doing mundane things like gardening. Not knowing what to think of it, he lingered for a few moments, then said awkwardly, Yes, thank you, it's very tasty. It was too good, in fact. The food was disappearing from his plate at a concerning speed, which meant that he had to sort out his thoughts fast. Basically, there were 3 things about his recent adventure that were better kept secret. The first one was the miraculous coins and their connection to the sanctuary of Noctis. The second was Mordred, despite the fact that Effie and Kai had easily believed him. Telling total strangers that there were voices in his head was not the best of decisions. Besides that, Sunny got the feeling that the Lost Prince might have been in not-so-friendly relationship with the emissaries of the Valor clan that resided on the Chained Isle. Sky Tide did not serve Valor directly, but her clan was still allied to the rulers of Bastion, to the point that one might have gone so far as to call them a vassal clan. And lastly, there was the whole thing about the Ebony and Ivory Towers, the connection between them and the Seed of Nightmare. If it threatened to create a gate at any moment, he would have felt obligated to inform the White Feather clan so that someone else could destroy it before that happened. But since the seed was far from blooming, he wanted it all for himself. However, Sunny suspected that he would have to sacrifice one of these secrets to keep the others intact. The question was, which one? Finally, the food was gone from their plates, and the young woman in white poured beautiful ember tea into their cups. Sunny blew on his and glanced at Master Roan. So, not to appear impolite, sir, but to what do I owe the pleasure? Here it comes. He hesitated, then added, Is it about my friends making a ruckus after I have gone on an unusually long expedition? You weren't too inconvenienced by having to look for me, were you? He was expecting a confirmation, but instead, a surprised expression appeared on the strapping master's face. Look for you? Why would we look for you? Noticing that Sunny was confused, he remained silent for a moment, and then smiled. There must have been a misunderstanding. Nightingale and Raised by Wolves did indeed bring your disappearance to the attention of our clan. I was going to explore the places where you had been seen last to investigate, but luckily, Lady Kasha arrived at the sanctuary just in time. She informed us that you would return in a few weeks, so we didn't have to worry. A tense smile froze on Sunny's face. She did? Well, I'm glad your time wasn't wasted then. Damn it, damned Cassie and her damned visions. How much does she know? He took a sip of tea to hide his expression behind the cup for a second. That changed things, on purpose or not. Cassie had helped him avoid the scrutiny of having to explain his absence to the White Feather clan. That, however, posed another problem. And that problem was Song of the Fallen herself. The timing of her visit to the sanctuary of Noctis and this strange action of hers were probably not a coincidence. What was she playing at? Or was he being too paranoid, looking for a meaning where there was none? Cassie was not some Machiavellian mastermind after all, unlike Sunny and Nephi's both. At least she had not been. Putting down the cup, Sunny cleared his throat. But then, why did you invite me? Master Roan smiled and produced a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Oh, it was just to hand you this. Lady Kasha left you a message before leaving on an expedition with her cohort. Sunny tried to seem calm and nonchalant as he took the piece of paper and unfolded it. Inside, 2 words were written in awkward handwriting. Desecrated Grove. They were without a doubt left by Cassie. After becoming blind, writing was hard for her. That's why the penmanship seemed so crude. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Desecrated Grove. Sunny had heard of that place. It lay west of the sanctuary, separated from it by a stretch of long chains. The grove itself was not the most deadly of territories, but there were several corrupted creatures nesting on islands in close vicinity to it. Had Cassie known that he would want to speak to her, and left him a direction to where to find her? Why would she lead her cohort to that remote place, which was situated as far from the Hollow Mountains as one could get on the Chained Isles? Strange. Sunny folded the note, put it under the vambrace of the puppeteer's shroud, and smiled. Thank you. Things like that weren't too strange. Since he had gone on a long expedition and missed Cassie, who was planning to remain in the dream realm for a while herself, it was logical to communicate through messages. She could have just sent one to his communicator, though. Although, if he was honest with himself, there was a big chance that he would ignore the message if she had. Sunny finished his tea and then asked cautiously, So I can go? Master Roan shrugged. Sure, it was nice to see you again, Sunless. I hear your emporium is doing well. Sunny couldn't believe his luck. Expressing his gratitude, he rose to leave. Just as he did, though, St. Tyrus spoke for the first time. Piercing him with a penetrating gaze, she said evenly, Have you been to the Reckoning Island? He froze. Under the stare of Sky Tide, twisting the truth didn't seem that wise anymore. Sunny hesitated, then said simply, Yes. St. Tyrus looked at him for a few moments, then turned away. Next time someone asks, say no. Taken aback, Sunny stared at the stunningly beautiful woman for a bit, gathered his courage, and then quietly asked, May I know why? Sky Tide kept her gaze at the breathtaking vista of the Chained Isles below them. Then, in a calm voice, she answered, You may not. Sunny descended from the White Feather's eyrie in a complicated mood. If he ever had doubts that the lost prince was harboring dire secrets, now there were none. Why else would St. Tyrus caution him to not speak about the mirror beast, who had seemingly been the only trace left of Mordred's existence? Mordred had conquered the first nightmare when he was only 12. Such an individual, surely, would have been as famous as Nephi's back in the real world. And yet, Sunny had never heard of him, or of anyone who had accomplished the same feat. It was almost as if someone very powerful had purposefully erased any mention of the mysterious prince from history. How had he lost his physical body to begin with, and where was his spirit body in the dream realm? Did he even have one? He must have had it once at least. The pack Sunny had found on the Reckoning contained a detailed map of the Chained Isles with the word, Hope, written on it next to a question mark. Back then, he thought that the owner of the pack had been killed by the mirror beast. Now, however, he suspected that it had belonged to Mordred himself. So the lost prince had at least visited the Chained Isles before disappearing. Was the great clan Valor complicit in his disappearance? Sonny had no real reason to come to that conclusion, other than the fact that the Chained Isles were in their sphere of influence, and that St. Tyrus hinted at her knowledge of the nature of the mirror beast. But why hadn't she killed it herself? I am going to have to ask Mordred a lot of questions when he appears. Which wasn't going to happen for many days, sadly. Until then, Sonny had other matters to attend to. He glanced at the sun and judged that it had barely reached its zenith. The moon wasn't going to appear for a while, so, even though the desire to place his precious coins on the altar gnawed on him, he decided to address the most pressing problem first. Cassie. No matter how reluctant Sonny was to face his former friend, he had to speak to her. He couldn't make plans for the future without knowing who would be by his side as he challenged the second nightmare. And he absolutely needed to challenge it. Collecting essence was fine, but becoming a master would change the power dynamic between him and Nephi's much more. And even though creating future cores would be harder after he achieved a higher rank, being an ascended also meant that there would be much fewer things out there that could squash him like a bug. Not only among the nightmare creatures but also among the humans. The more crumbs of information about the sovereign Sonny learned, the more disturbed he became. He was distrustful by nature. So he didn't believe that these hidden overlords would not try to exert their influence on him, or try to destroy him one day, simply by virtue of being able to do so. And even without this threat, there were hundreds of master in the world, which meant that there were hundreds of people who could kill him without breaking a sweat. But if he became a master himself, well, then there would only be a few dozen individuals he would have to be really wary of. Like St. Tyrus. Not to mention that, as an ascended, he would be free to come and go from the dream realm as he wished. He would even be able to abandon it forever and never come back. Wouldn't that be a nice choice to have? So, the desecrated grove it is. Sonny frowned, then returned to his room, took out his map from the covetous coffer, and spent some time adding all the details he remembered from Mordred's map onto it. Soon, he was in possession of an intricately detailed depiction of most of the Chained Isles on his hands, complete with descriptions of what dangers he was likely to meet, and where. With its help, traveling to his destinations was going to be much safer. Sonny studied the route to the desecrated grove and sighed. Shouldn't be too hard. I can probably reach it by morning and return to the sanctuary the next day at night, when the moon is high in the sky. And finally get to use the coins he had bled so much to earn. He dismissed the covetous coffer, stretched his limbs, and headed toward the exit from the sanctuary. The journey to the remote island that Cassie named in her note indeed turned out to be uneventful. Sonny rode the heavenly chains in the form of the shadow and traversed the islands on foot, avoiding any nightmare creature that crossed his path. The southern part of the Chained Isles was relatively safe, or at least safer than the northern part. Well, no surprise, it was bordering regions of the dream realm that had been tamed by humans more than a decade ago, while to the north there was nothing except for the dreadful Hollow Mountains. The desecrated grove itself was somewhat near the main route from one of the great chains, which connected all of the Chained Isles to the rest of the dream realm, to the sanctuary of Noctis. People who were either coming to or leaving the region used that route to travel between the Great Chain and the Citadel, so it was often patrolled by the White Feather forces. Sonny traveled along the established route, then left it to go deeper into the dangerous wilderness of the Flying Islands. He carefully avoided all the places where corrupted nightmare creatures were known to dwell, and kept his eyes open for any sign of danger. However, nothing that couldn't be avoided happened. None of the islands Sunny wanted to cross were rising, so he even managed to escape having to endure the crushing. The sun rolled down over the horizon and disappeared, and the moon followed its example. As the first light of dawn ignited in the east, Sunny flew through the shadows and then soared high into the air, cresting the edge of a large island and softly landing on its soil. The desecrated grove, he had arrived. Sunny let out a heavy sigh. He had almost hoped that some terrible monstrosity would attack him on the way, making it so he wouldn't have to meet Cassie. The searing mess of emotions he felt toward her was much scarier than any nightmare creature could ever hope to be. At the end of the day, humans were much harder to deal with than monsters. The desecrated grove was a large island, its surface overtaken almost entirely by a forest of twisted, charred, dead trees. The ground was covered by a thick layer of ash, which was often thrown into the air by the strong winds. Gray flakes rained down from the sky. There were many nightmare creatures nesting in the dark forest, and although most of them were only of the awakened rank, one had to be careful to not get ambushed, surrounded, or stumble upon an especially ferocious abomination. Sunny couldn't even begin to guess why Cassie would choose such a place to establish a camp. However, he could already see the signs of human presence. There were 4 chains connecting the desecrated grove to other islands, but the one he himself had used was the most convenient. Any sane leader would have chosen the same route, and even though the crushing was capable of making anyone's path unpredictable, the other 3 were just too much of a risk. That's why Sunny wasn't surprised to see human footprints leading toward the menacing wall of blackened dead trees, already mostly covered by a new layer of ash. There were also signs of a battle, with several misshapen carcasses laying on the ground and showing clear signs of their soul shards being removed. Judging by the fact that they were only partially devoured by the scavenging nightmare creatures, Cassie's cohort must have passed through no more than a week ago. Sighing, Sunny tied a piece of cloth around his mouth and nose, summoned the cruel sight, and started following the footprints. Soon, he entered the ashen veil of the twisted forest. His ability to see through any shadow proved to be invaluable once again. If not for that gift, he would have been scared witless, expecting a sudden attack to come from the surrounding darkness at any moment. With his sight, the shadow sense, and the ability to see all around himself with the help of one of the shadows, Sunny felt confident that nothing would be able to get close to him unnoticed. At least not on this comparatively tame island. But that was the thing about the dream realm. Even creatures that were supposed to be easy to deal with could kill you in a second if you weren't careful enough. Tame or not, everywhere in this god-forsaken world was a potential death trap. As Sunny went deeper into the forest, he discovered more signs of Cassie's cohort passing through. There were marks left behind by violent skirmishes, as well as several abandoned campsites. It seemed as though the fire keepers had been taking their time, slowly exploring the path ahead and moving their camp further and further into the depth of the desecrated grove after clearing a long stretch of it. Why travel here all the way from the Night Temple? She had to cross the entire region, getting away from the Hollow Mountains, only to get stuck on an unexceptional island. I just don't get it. Sunny was clearly missing something. With a slight frown, he turned into a shadow and glided through the darkness, covering much more distance with every minute than he had been on foot. He still preferred to be cautious, though, sending one of the shadows ahead and moving slow enough to be able to react in time if something unexpected happened. After an hour or so, he finally found them. Cassie and her cohort were camped at a secluded clearing that was around halfway to the heart of the island, dangerously far removed from the edge. If the desecrated grove entered the ascent phase, the time window for them to get back to the chain before the crushing became deadly would be extremely narrow. Since it was early morning, most of the members were asleep, with only 2 lookouts standing watch with torches in their hands. Sunny observed them for a few seconds from the shadows and then sent his own forward. He recognized both of the watchmen, since they had spent a lot of time together during the struggle for the throne of the Bright Castle, as fellow members of Neff's faction. The Firekeepers were comprised of about 40 survivors of the Forgotten Shore, those who had decided against pledging their allegiance to the legacy clans that wanted to recruit them, as well as the government, and had not become fully independent like Effie and Sunny had. Although Cassie was their nominal leader, she didn't command the whole host herself. Instead, Neff's followers were divided into several cohorts, each operating in different regions of the Dream Realm. Firekeepers were not a formal organization, but more of a loose alliance of people who shared similar beliefs and principles, the main being the hope that Changing Star was going to return alive one day. Sunny's shadow entered the circle of light created by one of the torches, glared at the lookout, and then waved at him. The young man stared at it with wide eyes. "What the hell?" The other swiftly turned, summoning her weapon. "What is it?" The first one remained silent for a moment, then sighed. "Ah, crap." He massaged his temple, as if experiencing a headache. "I think it's Sunny." There were 8 people in Cassie's cohort, every one of them a familiar face. Well, Sunny more or less knew all of the survivors of the Forgotten Shore, had fought with them back to back, so that wasn't surprising. What did surprise him, though, was how warm they welcomed him. Even if some were clearly displeased with having to wake up a bit early and wary of his entrepreneurial ambitions, which they had been amply subjected to during the war for the Bright Castle, they were still clearly happy to see Sunny. Soon, his shoulder began to hurt a little from all the friendly slaps it received. "Would you look at that? 4 months on these damned islands, and this is the first time we actually cross paths. How have you been, Sunny?" "Oh, I was so sad that we missed you in the sanctuary. Glad you decided to visit." Sunny smiled weakly and responded to their greetings, feeling both strangely warm inside and extremely uncomfortable with all the attention. Truth be told, he was glad to meet them again, too. He still couldn't quite believe that anyone had escaped the Forgotten Shore, let alone a whole 100 of young men and women, some of whom were in front of him right now. After the greetings were done, he looked around and raised an eyebrow. "Sure guys, likewise, but where's Cassie?" The Firekeepers glanced at each other, then one of them smiled. "Oh right, you must be dying to see her." "Not exactly." The girl who spoke shook her head and turned toward a path leading somewhere away from the camp. "Let's go, I'll take you." Not too far from the camp, a deep hole was dug near the roots of one of the dead trees. Beside it, with her back to him, stood a delicate girl with pale blonde hair and an elegant rapier hanging in a scabbard on her belt. Hearing their footsteps, Cassie turned around. A small smile appeared on her face. "Sunny, you've made it." Cassie had changed since the last time they met. Her hair was longer, and there was a strange silver half-mask covering her eyes, its surface blind and intricately engraved. It matched the polished steel of the armor she was wearing on top of a midnight blue coat, comprised of a short cuirass, vambraces, greaves, and a segmented pauldron. The quiet dancer hung on her belt, but there was also a long dagger opposite it, its guard twisting upward. What changed most of all, however, was her demeanor. The blind girl seemed much older somehow, firmer, poised, but also weary, as if pressed down upon by the weight of years. What years? She's younger than me." Sunny struggled a little, then pretended to smile too, for the benefit of the young Firekeeper who no doubt expected a warm reunion. No one knew what had happened between them, after all. "Yeah, I received your note, cryptic as it was, and here I am, in the flesh." The girl who had led him to Cassie glanced at them, then made an excuse and went back to the camp, tactfully deciding to remove herself from what she thought was going to be an emotional meeting of 2 old friends. Former friends, really. Sunny hesitated a little, then asked, "So how have you been?" Cassie sighed, then turned back to the excavated roots of the charred tree. After a while she spoke. "Not so good, actually." Her voice sounded distant. We have tried to venture into the Hollow Mountains, as you must know, but it was hopeless. That place is pure death for anyone who dares set foot into the mist. We hope to find a way back to the Forgotten Shore. In the end, however, we were lucky to simply escape alive." Cassie remained silent for a bit, then asked, "What about you?" Sonny grinned. "Me? Oh, I've never been better." With that, he summoned the covetous coffer, fished out some fresh, fragrant fruit from it, and sat down on a nearby stump. Taking a big bite out of a juicy peach, he chewed it with gusto and then glanced at the blind girl. "Oh, sorry, I only brought enough for one." Yes, Sonny knew that he was being ridiculously petty, but so what? Pettiness was his middle name, figuratively speaking. "So you failed to return to the Forgotten Shore, and now, what are you doing exactly? Why are you digging up trees in this vile forest?" Cassie smiled a little, then answered evenly, "I am looking for something." Then she turned away from the hole and faced him. "Yes, I told the White Feather clan that you will return alive. No, I did not see a vision of where you were and what you did in the past month." Sonny stared at her with a dark expression. "What is this? She can read minds now." "And no, I can't read minds. If you must know, my second ability allows me to sense what will happen in the next few seconds. That's why I can walk around without a cane and knew what you were going to say." He grimaced. "That's going to be very annoying, I think." Sonny looked at Cassie, reevaluating her armor and weapons. With an ability like that, she might have become a very formidable fighter. Or not. He didn't really understand how it worked, to tell the truth. So he asked curiously, "Does that mean that you can see now?" Cassie shook her head. "No, not exactly. But if I want to take a step forward and sense falling into a ravine, I can walk around it instead. If I sense being pierced by a sword, I can try to deflect it. And if I sense being asked a question, I can answer it." He thought for a bit, then said, "So what is my next question?" The blind girl simply shook her head. "I don't need to waste soul essence to guess. You want to know how I knew that you will come back to the sanctuary in one piece." Sonny finished his fruit, threw the pit into the hole, then smiled. "Indeed. If you did not spy on my recent adventures, then how did you know that I wasn't going to die?" Cassie lingered for a bit, then turned away. After a while she said, "It's still spring." He scowled. "What does that have to do with anything? You knew that I would be fine because it's spring." Cassie smiled. "Yes, I knew that you wouldn't die, because you see." She paused for a moment, and then said calmly, "I already saw you die in winter, both of us actually." After Cassie dropped that bomb, Sonny simply stared at her for a whole minute, his eyes wide and the words refusing to come out of his mouth. Finally, he gritted his teeth and hissed, "What the hell, you saw us die?" Cassie sighed, then gave him a simple nod. "Yes." Sonny growled, "Elaborate." The blind girl hesitated for a little while, then asked evenly, "Are you sure you want to know? You've seen what happened the last time I shared my vision with someone and tried to challenge fate." A dark, resentful expression appeared on Sonny's face. With his voice full of anger, he spat. "Who cares? Tell me what you saw this instant." Cassie sighed and turned to face him. "All right, but remember what happened to the three of us before. How we tried to deceive fate but were played by fate instead." She grew quiet for a moment and then said, "This is what I saw. There was a crumbling island falling into the sky below and the two of us, bloodied, mangled, and weak, falling down with it. It was snowing. Above us, a giant bird flew, wreathed in thunderclouds. It was fighting a terrifying black wyvern, their blood falling down like rain. Then the darkness swallowed us and we were gone. Cassie looked down, then added solemnly, "That was how we died." When Cassie was done speaking, Sonny remained silent for a bit. Then he said, "Anything else? More details?" The blind girl shook her head. Because of the blizzard, it was hard to see what surrounded the crumbling island, and it was already too damaged to recognize it. So, no more details. You were wearing a metal armor, I think, not the puppeteer's shroud." Sonny massaged his temple with a bleak expression on his face. "Well, it's not as bad as I expected." Cassie tilted her head a little. "It's not." A dark smile appeared on his lips. "We already know that your visions are easy to misinterpret. You haven't seen us die, really, right? The light go out of our eyes, our bodies being torn apart, and so on. You just saw us badly injured and falling into the darkness. So what? I have already fallen into the sky below once, and here I am, good as new." The blind girl hesitated. "You fell into the sky below." Sonny waved a hand dismissively. "Yes, but that doesn't matter. Wait, no, actually it does matter. It's the reason I came to see you. I have almost forgotten because of this charming revelation of yours." After that he grew silent, thinking about Cassie's vision of their death. Despite Sonny's bravado inside, he wasn't as nonchalant about it as he wanted to appear. Yes, her visions had been misleading in the past, but not all of them. Some were as straightforward as possible. And yes, although he had already gone through the endless void below the chained aisles once, there was no guarantee that he would survive it a second time, not unless he had chosen to do so himself. After the twisted rock was destroyed by the crushing, Sonny managed to survive due to 3 reasons. One of them was Mordred. One was that he had already been near the tier, and the other was the "where is my eye" enchantment that he had used in a moment of desperation. That enchantment had almost killed him itself, and only failed to do so because his already exhausted shadow essence ran out just at the right time. If his reserves had not been depleted, and he was forced to endure staring into the eternity of fate for a few seconds more, his mind would have been destroyed completely. If he was thrown into the sky below once more, away from the tier, there would be a very slim chance of him finding the rift in the ocean of divine flame again, especially if he was as badly wounded as Cassie implied. And there were giant birds fighting wyverns in the sky above. So what he had to do now was, well, what the hell was he supposed to do? The vision did not provide any actionable information. The only thing Sonny could think of was to work really hard to get himself a flight-capable memory or echo before winter. And maybe make a will. He sighed. "So, what have you been doing to prevent the 2 of us from dying? How can you calmly dig around in the mud, knowing what is going to happen?" Cassie lingered for a moment, then smiled. "In fact, I am digging around in the mud for that very reason." Sonny snorted. "What are you hopping to find there? A pair of wings?" She shook her head. "No, I am just hopping to find a preserved root." "A root? What can a root do to save us from dying?" He kept quiet for a bit, then said, "All right, suit yourself. Anyway, I wanted to talk with you about something." Cassie looked into the depths of the forest, then nodded. "About what?" Sonny gathered his thoughts, then explained. "I have found a nightmare seed, a very special one that contains a very special second nightmare, and I want to challenge it after the winter solstice. Actually, scratch that. I want to challenge it by the end of the autumn." His initial plan was to give himself and his companions 7 months to prepare, but considering what Cassie saw happening in winter, these plans had to change. Whatever it was that she predicted, facing it as a master would be much more desirable than facing it as an awakened. Unless her vision took place inside the nightmare, of course. Regardless, now, he decided to return to the ivory tower before the autumn was over. 6 months was a tight amount of time to get ready, but not so different from his initial plan. He could make it work, provided that other people whom he wanted to take with him would, too. That seed is also located in a very special place. In fact, it's right above our heads in the ivory tower. I found a way to get there without being killed by the crushing, although that other path is, arguably, just as dangerous. Sunny pointed down. It's in the sky below. Effie and Kai are coming to the chained isles to join me. We hope that you will challenge the nightmare with us too. Oh, and we'll need your help getting into the night temple. There's an item we need to retrieve there. Cassie faced him and remained silent for a while. With her eyes being hidden by a mask and her face unmoving, it was hard to tell what she was feeling or thinking about. Finally, she said, "You want me to join, after what I have done to you?" Unseen to her, a cold expression appeared on Sunny's face. He looked at the blind girl for a long time, then shrugged. "Why not? We don't have to be friends to go into a nightmare together. We don't even need to like each other. We can just be temporary allies. Wasn't that what I was to you anyway? If you can handle that, so can I. I don't mind being used as long as I get to use you in return. Pretty simple." Cassie turned away and didn't say anything for a few moments. Then she answered, "All right, I will go to the night temple with you and help you conquer the second nightmare. But I want your help with something in return." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "My help with what?" The blind girl hesitated for a second and then said, "You have been to the Shipwreck Island, haven't you? The creature that dwells there in a few months, I want you to help me kill it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.